Hi, welcome and grüezi to a special short episode of Governance Unplugged, which will also be available as a video podcast on YouTube. In today's episode, we want to talk about AI augmented audits, a roadmap to a future-ready internal audit function. I'm truly delighted to share today's conversation with Dr. Robert Zergenyi from Visionaire, who many of you already know from the previous podcast episode, How Internal Audit Brings Reality to AI. Boards need truth, not tech optimism. Robert and I work closely with organizations to help strengthen the quality, relevance, and impact of internal audit. And a big part of that work today is helping internal audit evolve in a world that is becoming more digital, more data-driven, and increasingly shaped by artificial intelligence. That is exactly why I was very excited when Robert's new ebook, AI Augmented Audits, was released just a few weeks ago. In my view, it does an outstanding job of explaining in a very practical and thoughtful way what really matters if internal audit functions want to move successfully into the future. What I especially value is that this ebook does not present AI as a trendy extra or a purely technical topic. No, instead it shows clearly that AI is part of a much broader transformation, one that moves internal audit away from manual, sample-based and periodic work towards a function that is more continuous, more insightful, more evidence-based, and ultimately more valuable to our management and to our boards. So today I'm very pleased to invite Robert to walk us through some of the most important messages of its ebook and to share what all this means in practice for chief audit executive, boards and organizations that want to future-proof their internal audit function. Robert, it's very great to have you here.
Thomas, thanks so much for the introduction, and it's indeed a pleasure to be present here.
So Robert, let's dive right into it, and let me start with a broad opening question. What was the main reason why you felt it was important to write this ebook now, and what is the central message you most want internal audit leaders to take away from your ebook?
Thanks a lot, Thomas. The main reason I felt it was important to write this ebook now is that the environment which internal audit operates has fundamentally changed. Organizations today are faster, more complex, more automated, and far more interconnected than in the past. Traditional audit methods, especially those relying heavily on manual work, sample testing, and periodic review, are increasingly no longer sufficient to keep pace with that reality. The central message of the ebook is therefore quite simple. AI is not here to replace auditors, it is here to elevate internal audit. It enables the function to move from manual assurance work towards continuous, data-driven risk intelligence. That means broader coverage, greater speed, more precision, and earlier visibility of emerging issues. But even more importantly, it frees auditors from repetitive and mechanical activities and allows them to focus on where they create the most value: judgment, challenge, root cause analysis, culture, resilience, and strategic risks. So in essence, the paper argues that AI is not just another tool for internal audit. It is a defining capability shift that can make the function more forward-looking, more relevant, and more impactful for management and board.
That is a very strong starting point, Robert, and I think it captures the opportunity extremely well. So one thing I found particularly powerful in your ebook is that you do not only speak about AI in broader terms, you actually show how it can reshape the entire audit lifecycle. Can you talk us through how AI changes the audit lifecycle and where you see the biggest practical shift for internal audit teams?
Yeah, in the next slide, you see that one of the most important ideas in the ebook is that AI can strengthen the entire audit lifecycle, not only isolated activities. It starts with planning and risk assessment, which you see in the corner left. Traditional audit planning has often been built around annual cycles, interviews, and historical assessment. AI changes that by helping internal audit create a much more dynamic and living audit universe. It allows the function to identify changes, detect weak signals, and sense risk more continuously. Then in the second phase, in business assessment and scoping, AI helps auditors move beyond how processes are described on paper and instead understand how they actually operate in reality. By analyzation, transaction flows, control execution, system interaction, and actual process behavior, audit teams can scope much more sharply and focus on what truly matters. In testing, the shift becomes even more visible. AI enables full population analysis rather than relying mainly on sample testing. That makes assurance more precise, more scalable, and ultimately more defensible. It also has major impact on issue identification and root cause analysis. Instead of simply identifying isolated failures, AI helps uncover recurring patterns, systemic weaknesses, and even behavioral or cultural drivers behind these issues. Lastly, in the areas of reporting and action follow-up, AI enhances communication by providing greater clarity and actionable insight for boards, management, and process owners. Additionally, in transitions follow-up activities, from manual tracking of actions to ongoing validation of remediation effectiveness, a critical step in the overall process. So the biggest practical shift is this. Internal audit moved from periodic and retrospective assurance towards a more continuous, targeted, and intelligence-led form of assurance.
I think this is such an important distinction, especially because many people still talk about AI as if it were one single capability. What I find very useful in your paper is that you make a clear distinction between different types of AI and why that matters so much for internal audit. So, what do internal audit leaders really need to understand about the different types of AI, and why is that distinction so important?
Yes, Thomas, that point is absolutely critical. Artificial intelligence is often discussed as though it constitutes a single technology. However, distinct types of AI serve different functions. Currently, generative AI attracts the greatest industry attention and investments, yet alternative models frequently provide more substantive value for auditing applications. For example, large language models offer strong capability in summarization, classification information, extraction from documentation, analysis of policies, reports, procedures, and meeting records. Nevertheless, they are not designed for predictive tasks. Generative AI excels in drafting content, structuring information, and scenario development. While it significantly accelerates workflows, its outputs do not constitute evidence and always require human review and validation. Machine learning, by contrast, is highly effective for prediction, anomaly detection, and risk scoring. It analyzes structured data to identify patterns that assist in estimating where issues may arise. Understanding these distinctions is essential for internal audit professionals to select the appropriate type of AI for specific assurance objectives. Employing an unsuitable AI model introduces the risk of false assurance or misplaced confidence. Therefore, advancing maturity in AI-enabled internal audit involvement, not only adopting AI tools, but also ensuring alignment between the AI type and the assurance question, coupled with a clear understanding of each technology's limitation.
That brings us very naturally to another major theme in your book, and one that I personally find extremely relevant. You make it very clear that adopting AI in internal audit is not mainly about buying tools, it's about transforming the function itself. What does successful transformation really require, and what are the key building blocks of an AI-enabled internal audit function?
Yes, Thomas, I think transformation and managing change is probably the most important message of the ebook. Successful AI adoption in internal audit is not mainly a technology project. It's a transformation of the whole function. And for that transformation to be sustainable, I describe 4 key pillars in the book. The first is vision and strategy. Internal audit needs a clear understanding of why it's using AI, how it supports the audit mandate, and how it creates value for the stakeholder. The second is governance. There must be clear accountability, ethical safeguards, structured oversight, and transparency around how AI is used within the function. The third is people. Auditors need support in building new capabilities. They must experience AI as something that strengthens their role rather than threatens it. Learning should happen in the flow of their work through practical use, coaching, and experience sharing. The fourth is quality assurance. AI should improve consistency, depth, and audit quality, but it must be also governed carefully so that conclusions remain defensible and trust remains high. The human side of transformation is especially important. Change works when people understand the purpose, when early wins become visible, and when progress is measured not just by tool usage, but by stronger insight, better audit quality, more stakeholder value, and more effective assurance overall.
And perhaps that leads us perfectly into the final forward-looking question of today. Your conclusion is, in my view, both realistic and encouraging for the profession, because it makes clear that organizations automate more, the importance of human judgment in internal audit actually grows. So if you look ahead, Robert, what do you believe will define the future internal auditor in an increasingly AI-enabled world?
Yeah, that's a very important point. I believe the future auditor will be assessed less by manual testing and more by the ability to interpret AI outputs, challenge assumptions, and connect technical signals to governance, culture, incentives, and accountability. As organizations automate more, the need for human judgment becomes greater, not smaller. The auditor of the future will need to understand how human and machine decision-making interact, where risks emerge from that interaction, and how accountability can be preserved in increasingly automated environments. That means the profession becomes more strategic, more analytical, more relevant. Auditors will spend less time gathering evidence mechanically and more making sense of what it means, challenging management and helping boards and executives see risks more clearly. So the future of internal audit is not about competing with AI. It's about using AI to elevate the profession while keeping judgment, ethics, and independence firmly at the center.
Robert, thank you so much for this short but I think very sweet conversation. I think your ebook provides a very clear, practical, and forward-looking contribution to one of the most important questions facing internal audit today. We spent now the past 15 minutes talking about your ebooks. So if some of our listeners would like to obtain a copy of this ebook in order to dive deeper, where could they find it?
Yeah, Thomas, thank you so much for having the opportunity to present some of the content of the ebook. The ebook is available on our company webpage, visionaire.com, in the shop, or just send me an email on info@visionaire.com. Also, if you have any comments or if you need any support in that area.
For me, one of the strongest messages is that the future of internal audit is not about replacing people with technology. It is much more about using technology to elevate the role of internal audit, to make it more continuous, more evidence-based, more insightful, and more valuable to our management and boards. And this is exactly why this topic is so central to the work of Robert and I are doing together with organizations, helping them strengthening the quality, impact, and future readiness of their internal audit function by harnessing the power of AI. And here my final closing line for today's podcast topic. Internal audit will not be defined by how much AI it uses, but by how wisely it uses it to strengthen trust, insight, and accountability.
Yeah, Thomas, exactly, spot on.
And to our listeners, thank you very much for tuning in today, and make sure to subscribe to Governance Unplugged. And if there is any topics you would like to explore or a guest you would like to hear from, please don't hesitate to drop me a message on LinkedIn. And as always, together, let's build stronger, more resilient organizations, one conversation at a time. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and keep driving governance excellence.